Approach, Seeker, and Ask. I am your host, Casey Budge, and this is the Oracle Podcast. And we are so back. We got the official trailer for the season 2 Percy Jackson and the Olympians show today. And I also just got done rewatching the first 2 episodes of the first season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. So I will be going over the trailer, and I will be going over the first 2 episodes of the first season, and I'll be doing this every week up until the new season comes out on December 10th, and the week before will be my finale, where I will go over the 2 movies that got made, so the 2 live-action Percy Jackson movies, and I putting my body, my mental health on the line for you guys watching the 2 movies that are what they are. You know, some may call them disasters, some may call them garbage. It's kind of a little bit of one, a little bit of column B, you know. But I'm really excited to get back into this. Jackson has been my favorite book series for a long time. It's still one of my absolute favorites, but I do like some other ones now. But Percy Jackson always has a special place in my heart. And so without further ado, let's get into the first 2 episodes of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Season 1. The first one is titled after the first chapter. Iconically, I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. The intro is hype. It's just as hype as it is in the books. It goes over the classic lines from the beginning of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. It's just as hype. It is just as accurate to the book as I would possibly want it to be. The Mrs. Dodds attack is really cool. I really like the way that they go about that, where it makes it seem more plausible that Percy could just think that it's a dream instead of something that like happened, and he's like, it makes it feel more like, oh no, like Percy, you're not just like going crazy. Like this could have just been a daydream. This could have just been something that you made up in your mind, instead of like Grover and everyone just gaslighting him into believing that Mrs. Dodds never existed, which is part of it too. But now it's like, oh, was I just the whole time? Like, was this just like a super vivid daydream that was going on? I don't know what's going on, but in this, it's just done a little bit differently, and I really like that. However, the next part, we get to Grover and Percy are sitting in the principal of Yancey's office, and Percy's like, yeah, like I didn't touch Nancy, I didn't shove her into the water fountain. Like, no way, man. And then Grover, like a villain in a Greek tragedy, a betrayal that befits a Greek tragedy, like stabs him in the back. It's Julius Caesar getting knifed in the back. Percy is absolutely destroyed. And honestly, I'm surprised that Percy, like, if I were put in Percy's same position, where Grover's like, yeah, I definitely saw him, like earlier, he was talking about shoving Nancy in the water fountain, and then he's lying now. He definitely shoved her in the water fountain. I would have punched him. I would not have had as much restraint as Percy does. But Percy, holds his tongue. He doesn't punch Grover in the face, and I gotta respect him for it. But I do kind of love the way that they forced Grover into a more difficult position here, where he kind of had to put his friendship aside with Percy and had to get him out of Yancey at whatever cost it was. So he had to set aside his obviously deep adoration for Percy and their friendship, and be like, yeah, Percy did this so that he would get kicked out, so that the monsters wouldn't get to him as soon. I really, really like that part. But it still hurt my soul to watch it. So I think that it is ultimately a great change. I think that it adds a little bit more layers and complexity to Grover's character in this point. But I obviously, it was hard to watch, because as these 2 are supposed to be the closest, the best of friends, and they're just not at this point, and it's hard to watch. It kind of bums me out that this doesn't have deeper effects later, through the rest of the episodes. If I kind of wish that, because Grover betrays Percy, I wish Percy didn't trust Grover, and that's maybe why his mom didn't get out of there or something like that. Like they were delayed, and so because Grover was trying to get Percy out of there, Percy doesn't trust Grover, and so they didn't get out of the car in time or something, and so they didn't end up or like Percy's mom doesn't end up making it. I wish there was something a little bit more like that, but I still really like this change ultimately. And then we move on to the scene where Percy goes home to Smelly Gabe. And honestly, like, Smelly Gabe is a jerk in this version as well. But him and Sally kind of have like some light-hearted banter, and like that it seems like they have almost a positive, if not like a little bit, not positive necessarily, but not as bad of a relationship as they have in the book. It doesn't seem like Smelly Gabe is like physically abusive. Obviously, you can't tell that just from this one scene of them together, but it does not seem like they have as bad of a relationship as they do in the books. And them having a bad relationship in the books in the way that they do justifies the way that Smelly Gabe's story ends and the way that Sally deals with him at the end of the season. And if you don't have that setup of Smelly Gabe being such a jerk throughout the whole season, then it does not have as cathartic of a payoff at the end. Obviously, I don't want Percy and Sally to have had to go through the worst abuse and trauma from living with Gabe this whole time. But to end the season like they do, which they still do, like they still end the season in the same way, but they don't set it up in the same way. So I just feel like that isn't quite as earned in this. But overall, I think that it may have been a smart decision to not have him be such a jerk, but maybe you could have changed the ending as well. Sally crying in the car when Percy wakes up, like when they get to Montauk and Percy wakes up, and you just see like a single tear running down Sally's face because she knows what's happening and she knows that she might not get to see Percy a lot anymore. Absolutely. If that doesn't tear your heartstrings out, I don't know what will. And then it's immediately followed by one of my least favorite parts of the episode, and that's Sally telling Percy about the gods and the mythological world. I feel like this is one of the weakest parts of not only this episode, but the entire show. I feel that Percy having a poor understanding of the mythological world is what allows Annabeth to be such an incredible character, especially in this first book. In the later books, Percy is expected to know a little bit more about mythology. He's supposed to be able to recognize a little bit more. But especially in this first book, I think that Annabeth, her role in the book is a lot more knowing the mythological creatures, knowing how to deal with them, a little bit of that stuff. So Percy having all of this knowledge about the mythological world going into it feels like they're taking agency and part of the thing that makes Annabeth's character so great in the book away from her. Now, I'm not saying that I don't like Annabeth's character in the show. She's awesome. She's an incredible warrior. She's great. But this is personally my biggest problem with the show, is that they take the not just the lines, like I don't care about the who says what lines, but I care about the actual role that Annabeth plays in the story. And Annabeth's character and her actress do an amazing job. I love her actress. I think that she is doing an amazing job portraying such an amazing character. But I just personally don't love some of the stuff that they've taken away from Annabeth and given to Percy, because I feel like it makes Annabeth's role in the story a lot smaller. But again, let me know what you think about that in the comments. I'm sure that lots of you won't agree with that, but that is my personal opinion on it. And I love that they have the Mythomagic cards in it. I think that that's sick. But again, it's working from the same problem that Percy, I think, has too much knowledge about the mythological world. And then something that I talk about in the second episode is that the lightning bolt being stolen is not set up enough going up to that point. It feels jarring at the end of that episode when Chiron and Dionysus introduce the quest it isn't set up as much as in the book. From some of the very first chapters, it's talking about how since Christmas it's been storming. Since Christmas there have been a ton of plane crashes, a ton of yada yada yada. Like it goes on kind of ad nauseum, but it's all paid off when and like they mention it several times throughout, and like there are little hints being sprinkled in here and there. And in here, the only really mention of it, the only really thing that they did that hinted towards the quest, is the Fury, Mrs. Dodds, makes like an invention of like, where is it? And but it doesn't get brought up again until Percy is talking with his mom, and she's like, and he's like, how do you know that it was a she who asked it? Because Percy's mom was like, what did she say to you? But it's kind of, I really like how Rick sets it up in the book. I think that it is masterfully done to kind of sprinkle those hints and seeds in there that let it blossom into the mystery of what is going on. And the other thing that I like is that when they are driving, their car gets struck by lightning. Like Zeus straight up tries to murder Percy and his family while they're going to camp. And I don't know if he tries to murder them, but like he definitely hits them, hits their car with lightning while they're driving, and that causes them to wreck and get into a crash. And that kind of sets up that Zeus is probably angry at Percy for some sort of reason. And so it like is keeping hinting and growing at this mystery. And in this, instead of that, Sally uses her insane driving skills to wreck the Minotaur into an oncoming truck. It's this whole thing. I do not particularly like that part of the scene. It's a cool action set piece, but I just don't like it as much as what happens in the book. I think that what happens in the book is sweet. I think that it is peak, and I just don't like that as much. That being said, I love how the scene is played like a horror scene where you don't know where the Minotaur is, you don't know where he's coming. The lights from the car are like shining back and making it hard to see anything. I love that. The imagery there is incredible. And then also, Grover does a terrible job protecting Percy after swearing to protect him from, and I quote, anybody who looks at him wrong. Percy straight up gets almost swirled by the Clarice and them, and Grover isn't anywhere near him. I get that he had other stuff going on right there, but that Grover does a bad job after swearing what seems to be a binding oath at the end of the first episode. He does not do a great job protecting Percy. Sally actually makes me cry at the part where she says, "Hold fast, brave the storms." That part actually gave me chills. Relating it back to the story at the beginning when she was telling Percy about why he was named Perseus is so hype. The story of Perseus is incredibly good and incredibly topical to that. They were set adrift by the king, who received a prophecy about his grandson coming back and killing him, and so he like did this whole thing where he set Perseus and his mother out to drift in the sea, and it was a whole thing. But the thing about Perseus and his mother being set adrift in the sea is very topical and very poignant for this whole series. It's just, I really like that change. I like how they did that. There are parts of this episode that I don't like and don't love as much as the book, but again, this episode is still like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. It is so good. One of the other things that I don't like about this episode, however, is that Percy has his sword during the Minotaur fight. Mr. Brunner doesn't take it back from him. And I feel like that makes Percy defeating the Minotaur slightly less cool than it was in the books. I think that part of the mystique and part of the awe of Percy being the Minotaur in the books is that he does not have a weapon. He has to improvise, and like he has to break off a chunk of its horn to be able to finish off the Minotaur. That being said, this fight scene is still epic. It's still sweet, and Percy like breaking off the horn and slamming into the Minotaur's head, still super awesome. So like I said, I don't love this episode, but I really, really like it. Or I love this episode. It's still an 8 out of 10. It's still a very good episode, but there are things wrong with it, and lots of those things are not this episode's necessarily fault, but it is things that go on to over the whole season that I don't necessarily love as much. But what do you guys think about episode 1? Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know down in the comments. But before we do that, let's talk about the iconic opening to episode 2, You Drool in Your Sleep. Iconic line. Percybeth is still goated. So hyped to see that continue to develop in the second season. And I am so happy about that. It's just perfect. Like, there's some things that you cannot mess up in a adaptation, and that is one of them. Yeah, it has to say, you drool in your sleep. It's not negotiable. It's such an iconic line that if you mess it up, you're a dingus. And so that this is like an unforced. Yep, that's perfect. I like how Percy is still kind of mad at Grover here in the first scene. He is like, yep, you got me here alive. Now I don't really want to see you again. But then that doesn't really continue. I don't feel like Grover does anything to earn Percy's loyalty back until maybe the end of the episode. Maybe that's how they kind of resolve it. There is Grover telling Percy, like, Grover's like trying to get back in Percy's good graces, and so he goes to the Council of Clove Nibblers and he tells him that his mom is still alive. And despite Mr. D and Chiron's wishes, they're wanting to hold stuff back from Percy still, and that's going to be a continuing thing through the next several books, is that they're wanting to hold stuff back from Percy, and it never works out well. But yeah, I think that Percy and Grover having this kind of clash at the beginning makes their friendship in later episodes and going on into later books all the more powerful. And I really like that, how this is beginning. And I like how that there's that little bit of continuity, that Percy is still kind of pissed at Grover. And then on to the iconic entrance of Mr. D. It's awesome. Peter Johnson is here. I don't know, that the actor who plays Mr. D, I'm terrible with actor names, so please don't expect me to know those off the top of my head. But this interaction is better than the original. 100% better than the original. I think that it is so good, and I am so hyped about it. I love how it also establishes that heroes can do things that gods can't, as early as this, and it's with something simple. It doesn't have to be something complicated, and this makes sense. It makes sense that Percy could go and retrieve wine for Dionysus, and so it's just a little simple thing that sets up, well, why can't gods go and do all these things? Because heroes have to. And I think I really like that is kind of a distinct way of doing that. But again, in the book, at this part, they drop little hints, little sprinkling, little nuggets of information about the lightning bolt being missing, about like all sorts of other things, about Zeus being pissed, and all this little stuff. It's being sprinkled in here, and they don't do that as well in the series as they do in the books. And so that is a flaw, and that's part of the reason that at the end of this episode, it feels so jarring when they introduce the quest, because there has been less setup than it needed. Riptide being reintroduced is hype, and so is the cabin design. They look sweet. They look like they nailed the Greek architecture. They nailed that it looks like a camp, like a summer camp. And then we meet Luke, and Luke is perfect. Literally no notes. He is just like, I don't know what to say. Luke's perfect. He is perfectly depicted. He looks sweet. He has kind of a charismatic aura. He has a friend who is with him that I feel like he has a iconic line. He's like, is there a Greek god of disappointment? And his friend is like, well, there's so and so, but she's more like the Greek god of failure. And Luke's just like, dude, come on. So then we move on to the scene with Clarice in the bathrooms, and that's still iconic. I love how that works. I do wish that like Annabeth had still gotten like all wet in that. I don't like how Annabeth is portrayed in this first scene. She gets way better later on, but she is so unlikable in that first scene. And I think that's kind of the point. I think she's not meant to be super likable in this first part of this episode, or like especially from Percy's point of view. But she really is just so unlikable in this first scene. She makes me mad. And I do wish that they had included Annabeth's having a prophecy that she needed a child of the big three to go on a quest, because that kind of explains some of her interest in Percy, and it explains why she's so interested in this kid who beat the Minotaur with no weapon, which again, not as cool in the series as in the book, but I digress. Percy is super whiny in this episode. He grows on you a lot in the later episodes, but man, he is kind of whiny and unlikable in this episode. It's a little like Luke is in A New Hope. Like he goes on to be a great character, but man, he is kind of whiny and not very likable. And then he flosses later in this episode, and yeah, that's tough. That's a tough moment. He does pee in the woods though, so like that's pretty relatable. That's a very relatable guy thing. I do think that is very on brand for Percy. I feel like if you're just waiting around in the woods, that's a very guy thing to do. I think that's something you got to do. First day at camp stuff right there. So about the fight, yeah. So Percy initially during the fight, he kind of gets his butt whooped and he runs away from the Ares kids. Like when Clarice comes and confronts him, he is kind of getting his butt whooped. He's like kind of holding his own for a second, and then he gets his butt whooped, and then he goes down by the beach, but he doesn't get in the water. And then he starts winning the fight. Like he starts doing well and winning the fight before he gets in the water. And I don't like it. I think that he should have gotten in the water. Like I think that they should have backed him into the water. And then once he's in the water, he starts to absolutely smoke him. He starts to whoop on him like happens in the book, which makes sense because he has water-based abilities and he gets stronger when he's in the water, and it lends itself to when he beats Ares later in the book, or later in the series, well, later in the book, it lends itself to, okay, this would have been like you could have mirrored the imagery so perfectly of Percy flashing, like you could have even done a flashback of like, oh yeah, Clarice backed me into the water this same exact way, like father, like daughter. They backed me into the water because they're angry at me, and then I took advantage of that and beat them. But he didn't back into the water. He was still on the beach when he beat Clarice and the other Ares kids. So it doesn't even make any sense. But whatever, it's okay. It's not a huge deal, but it's just a little thing that's like, it's literally like he's a foot away from the water. Have him back into the water. That would be so much cooler, and it adds another element to the fight that would make it so much cooler. But again, it is what it is. The iconic moment of Percy with the trident above his head makes up for so much of the lackluster stuff in this episode. That is so hype. It is so iconic. The score is epic. It is so good. Chiron's speech is a little clunky because I don't think they wanted to like copy it word for word from the book. Like in the book, the chapter ends and it's like, Percy, you have been claimed by the sea god, Earthshaker, Stormbreaker, the god of something. Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. But at the beginning, in the show, he says like, you, Percy Jackson, you've been claimed by Poseidon, and then Poseidon at the end, and it just loses some of its like poetic effect, and so I don't feel like it is quite as good there. It's a little nitpick, but it just makes it feel that much less epic. And also they added on the quest scene at the end of this episode. Like Percy getting claimed should have been the end of this episode, and then they should have had the quest at the beginning of the next episode, or they should have set up more in the earlier episodes, because it feels like, oh yeah, we have this big climactic moment. Percy wins a fight and is claimed by his father, and that's such an epic, iconic moment in the book, and then it just is immediately kind of undercut by them giving him this quest that hasn't been set up. So this episode is not as good to me. I do not feel like this is as strong an episode. In fact, I feel like this is one of the worst episodes in this series, and I think that it's like a 6 out of 10. It is still adapting one of my favorite series of all time into a live action TV show adaptation that is overall very good, but I feel like this is the worst episode in the series. And so it is getting a 6 out of 10. But that is all the time that I have for tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening and or watching. Please be sure to leave a rating on wherever you're watching. If it's YouTube, be sure to like or use your hype. The small creator hype is really good at boosting up smaller accounts, so be sure to do that. If you're listening on Spotify, or if you're listening on another podcast player, be sure to leave us a rating. It really helps people find us. And if you have someone in your life who likes nerdy stuff, who likes the Stormlight Archive, who likes Percy Jackson, then please be sure to share this podcast with them, because they will like it too. Thank you so much for listening. This has been your prophecy, and this has been the Oracle Podcast.